My boss took credit for my presentation and got a razzo. I exposed everything to the board and watched him leave in handcuffs, Letarium, a 28-year-old guy working in corporate finance. And for most of my career, I've lived with this constant, knot in my chest, the pressure to prove I'm not just another replaceable face in a gray cubicle. When my company announced a high-stakes presentation to the board, I saw it as my moment. I spent months preparing, pouring everything I had into research, analysis, and strategy. This wasn't just about numbers. It was about showing that my ideas mattered. My boss, though, he was something else. To the executives, he was this charismatic, smooth-talking leader who always seemed to know the right words. But behind closed doors, he treated people like disposable tools. He had this way of making you feel small, like no matter how hard you worked, you'd always just be the guy holding his coffee while he soaked up the praise. I tried to ignore it at first, telling myself that if I just worked hard enough, the truth would shine through. But the whispers in the office painted a different picture. A coworker once muttered under their breath, "Careful, he has a habit of borrowing ideas." Another shrugged, "It's just how things work here. Keep your head down." I brushed those warnings off, telling myself my work was too detailed, too personal, to be stolen. I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd finally see me as someone worth mentoring instead of mocking. But late at night, sitting alone at my desk, the glow of spreadsheets reflecting off my tired eyes, I couldn't shake this gnawing fear. What if all my effort didn't matter? What if I was just setting myself up to be used? And as much as I wanted to believe otherwise, I was about to learn exactly how far he'd go. The weeks leading up to the presentation were some of the hardest of my life. I practically lived at the office, running on cold coffee and vending machine dinners. My friends stopped inviting me out, and my family started asking why I was missing birthdays and Sunday dinners. I kept telling them, just a little longer. This project could change everything. Deep down, I believed it. This was my chance to step out of the shadows. Every night, I'd stay long after the last lights in the building flickered off. I built spreadsheets so intricate they looked like spider webs, mapping out risks and projections. I drafted slides with bold strategies that could save the company millions. Each number, each chart, was proof of my worth. My health started slipping: headaches, weight loss, and that constant ache in my back from hunching over the keyboard. But I told myself it was all temporary. That's when my boss started showing interest. At first, it felt flattering. He'd lean over my cubicle and ask, "Mind walking me through your projections again? Or how exactly did you structure that revenue model?" I thought, maybe he's finally noticing me. Maybe this is my chance to build a real mentor relationship. But there was something in his tone I couldn't quite shake. He'd press for details, scribble notes on a pad he never showed me, and leave without so much as a thank you. Once, I caught him lingering at my desk when I'd stepped out, my laptop open, my draft slides still on the screen. He closed it quickly when I walked back in, flashing that practiced smile that never reached his eyes. Still, I buried my doubts under exhaustion and hope. I told myself, don't overthink it, just focus. But late at night, when I looked at the glow of my nearly finished presentation, I felt this unease crawling up my spine. And when the big day finally arrived, that unease became reality. The morning of the presentation, my stomach was in knots. I had barely slept, tossing and turning as my mind rehearsed every line, every transition, every answer I thought the board might throw at me. This was supposed to be my breakthrough moment, the day all those nights alone at my desk finally meant something. When I walked into the sleek boardroom, the air was heavy with the smell of polished wood and coffee. Executives in tailored suits were already seated, their conversations low and clipped. My hands were clammy as I clutched my notes, whispering to myself, "You've got this. You earned this." But then my boss cleared his throat. He walked to the front with that confident strut, the kind that made people lean in without question. I froze as he connected his laptop to the projector. And when the first slide appeared on the screen, my blood ran cold. It was my presentation, my graphs, my carefully chosen words, even the little details, like the color scheme I'd picked to reflect stability and growth, were there. He didn't even bother to change the order. I sat there in silence, my pulse thundering in my ears as he delivered every line I had practiced, word for word, slide after slide. My coworkers stole nervous glances at me, but no one spoke. I wanted to scream, to stand up and shout, "That's mine." but my throat locked up. The boardroom erupted in applause when he finished. "Brilliant work," one executive said. Another clapped him on the back. My boss smiled that smug, hollow smile, the kind that told me he thought he had one, and me. I just sat there, invisible, suffocating in humiliation as my dream moment turned into my worst nightmare. What I didn't know then was that this betrayal was only the beginning. The days after that meeting felt like walking through a fog I couldn't escape. Everywhere I turned, people were congratulating my boss. Visionary thinking, they called it. A game changer. I sat at my desk trying to focus on routine tasks while emails pinged in my inbox announcements of his well-deserved raise, his new bonus package, his elevated role in the company. Each notification was like a knife twisting deeper. The only recognition I got was a bland 3-line email from him. "Good job pulling the data together. Couldn't have done it without you." That was it. No acknowledgement of the months I'd poured into the project. No mention of the sleepless nights or the sacrifices I'd made. Just a pat on the head, like I was a dog who had fetched the stick. I tried to mask how gutted I felt, but my coworkers could see it. One stopped by my desk, lowering their voice. "I'm sorry. Everyone knows that was yours." But the fear in their eyes was clear. No one wanted to risk saying it out loud. Not when he had the board eating out of his hand. Inside, I was unraveling. My chest felt heavy every morning as I dragged myself to work. The office lights buzzing above me like a reminder of how small I was in the grand scheme of things. I'd replay the presentation in my head at night, hearing my own words delivered in his voice, the applause he soaked up while I sat frozen. Anger, shame, self-doubt, they tangled together until I couldn't tell one from the other. And yet, a small voice inside whispered, "This can't be the end. You can't just get away with it." But for now, he was winning, and I was drowning in silence. It started quietly, like the kind of rumor you only catch if you're really listening. In the break room, in the copy line, in half-whispered conversations people cut short when I walked by. My boss's sudden brilliance had everyone talking, but the undertone was different. Uneasy, resigned. One afternoon, while I was reheating leftover noodles in the microwave, a coworker I barely spoke to leaned over and muttered, "You're not the first." I froze. "What do you mean?" I asked, but they just shook their head, eyes darting around nervously before walking away. That one line haunted me. The next day, another colleague lingered by my desk after most people had left. She lowered her voice to almost a whisper. "Listen, he's been doing this for years. Stealing credit, reports, ideas, even full proposals. You just got hit the hardest because yours was too good to ignore." She gave me a sympathetic look before adding, "Don't bother fighting it. People have tried. They didn't last here." Her words burned like acid in my stomach. Suddenly, the half-smiles and awkward silences I'd noticed from others made sense. This wasn't an accident. It was a pattern. My boss wasn't just ambitious. He was a predator. He thrived on using people, breaking them, and climbing higher off the scraps of their work. But also, something inside me shifted. The shame I'd been carrying started to harden into something sharper. Rage for weeks. I'd convinced myself I was powerless, that this was just the way the corporate world worked. But hearing that I wasn't the first, that he'd done this to others, lit a fire in me I couldn't put out. For the first time, I wasn't just hurt. I wanted revenge. The shift came one night when I was combing through my folders, trying to find old drafts to remind myself I wasn't crazy, that all of it really had come from me. My eyes were burning from the screen's glow, and my hands shook as I clicked through endless That's when I stumbled on it. An early version of my presentation, saved weeks before the board meeting. The timestamp was clear as day. I opened it, and my heart raced. The slides were rough, unfinished, but undeniably mine. Every chart, every line of text bore my fingerprints. The metadata even showed my name as the creator. Proof, I scrolled faster, adrenaline flooding me. That's when I saw something else buried deep in my email archives. Messages from my boss. One subject line stopped me cold. "Remove your name before submission." I clicked it open, and there it was, his exact words. He had told me, under the guise of streamlining, to strip my name off the draft slides. "It'll look more professional if it comes from the department as a whole." he'd written. I had believed him. I had actually thought he was protecting me now. Staring at the email, the truth settled like ice in my veins. He had planned this from the start. He hadn't just taken my work, he had manipulated me into handing it over. Gift-wrapped dot. I sat there, trembling, the evidence glowing on the screen in front of me. Proof that could end him. Proof that could finally make people see the truth. For weeks, I'd been drowning in humiliation, powerless against his charm. But here, in my hands, was the rope I could use to pull myself back up. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something dangerous flicker inside me. Hope a week later, my boss hosted a dinner to celebrate his raise. He rented out a private room at one of the fanciest restaurants in the city, the kind of place where the chandeliers sparkle like diamonds and the waiters glide silently in black vests. I didn't want to go, but attendance wasn't optional. So I sat there at the long polished table, my suit collar digging into my neck. Pretending to smile while bile burned in my throat, he stood at the head of the table, swirling a glass of red wine like a king addressing his court. I couldn't have done it without my amazing team, he said, pausing just long enough for people to clap before adding with a smirk, especially my junior analyst here. He works hard, doesn't he? The table erupted in polite laughter. He winked at me like we were in on some private joke, but I felt every eye on me, not with respect, but pity. Each toast, each joke at my expense, chipped away at me until I barely recognized myself. I stabbed at my untouched steak, my chest tight, my ears ringing with shame. My coworkers looked down into their glasses, pretending not to notice. No one defended me. No one ever did. That night when I got home, I collapsed onto my bed, still in my suit. I stared at the ceiling as tears finally broke free. My hands shook as I whispered to the empty room, maybe they're right. Maybe I'll never win. For the first time, I questioned if fighting back was even worth it. Maybe I should quit, disappear, start over somewhere else. But deep down, even in that lowest moment, something refused to die the morning after that dinner. I dragged myself into the office, hollow-eyed and running on stale coffee. I felt like a ghost in my own life, moving through the motions while my boss basked in the glow of his new title. But the memory of that hidden file and those damning emails clung to me like armor. I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. I started small. In the quiet hum of the copy room, I pulled aside a coworker I trusted, someone who had once hinted that my boss had done this before. My hands trembled as I showed her the email on my phone. Her eyes widened. He told me the same thing, she whispered. Years ago with my report, I left it alone because I was scared. She looked at me, almost ashamed. But if you're really going after him, I'll back you. One by one, I began approaching others. Late nights at the office, whispered conversations in stairwells, hushed exchanges over coffee breaks. Each time, I revealed a piece of the evidence. Each time, I heard the same story. Stolen credit, manipulated drafts, silenced protests. My boss had built his entire career on a mountain of theft, and no one had ever stopped him. By the end of the week, I wasn't alone anymore. I had a small circle of allies, each with their own scars, each holding fragments of proof. We spread our documents across a desk one night, like detectives piecing together a crime. Emails, drafts, timestamps, testimonies, the pattern was undeniable. For the first time in months, I felt something stronger than humiliation. I felt power. And together we began to imagine a plan. Not just to confront him, but to destroy his entire illusion. Putting the plan together felt like assembling a weapon out of my own humiliation. Nights blurred into a steady rhythm of copying, printing, and organizing until my small apartment looked like an evidence locker, stacks of paper, USBs, and spreadsheets spread across the kitchen table under the yellow lamp. The scent of cheap takeout and ink hung in the air. I'd never imagined I'd be the kind of person to do this. But the more I handled the documents, the more righteous the work felt. We laid everything out like a crime scene. Timeline here, I said, pointing at the printed dates. Drafts and metadata over here. Mina, who used to work on compliance, read aloud snippets while the others nodded. He asked you to remove your name, she said, voice low. That email alone shows intent. Her hand hovered over an expense report that didn't add up, a small piece of a much larger puzzle. The dossier began to look terrifyingly solid. Original drafts with creator metadata, time-stamped emails telling me to strip my name, side-by-side, slide comparisons. and a handful of coworkers willing to write statements. We even found copies of proposals he'd rebranded months earlier. Each document stacked odds more heavily against him. I'd expected at least one loose thread, something that would make this feel like a bitter fantasy, but everything fit. We rehearsed how I would speak calm factual, not emotional. "Don't let him bait you," Mina warned. "Stick to the paper." I practiced until the words tasted like metal in my mouth. The plan was simple and dangerous. Request a closed-door meeting with the board. Present the dossier and bypass any middlemen. No publicity, no leaks, just raw evidence in front of the people who could act. I built the invite late one night, my fingers numb on the keyboard. The cursor blinked like a metronome. Subject, request for urgent executive review. I attached a neutral agenda and hit send before I could second-guess myself. The message left my outbox. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it over the hum of the refrigerator. Then, as if the universe timed everything for dramatic effect, footsteps clicked in the hallway outside my door. I didn't know whether they were his. I didn't know if I'd just trapped myself. The board meeting invite was accepted faster than I expected. That Monday morning, I walked into the conference room clutching a thick binder of evidence, my palms slick with sweat. The air smelled faintly of leather chairs and burnt coffee, but all I could hear was the drumbeat of my heart. The directors sat in silence as I plugged in the projector. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to start. Everything you're about to see was created by me, not him. Slide by slide, I laid out the timeline, the drafts with my name on them, the emails telling me to strip away credit, the metadata proving authorship. The room grew tense, every page I flipped tightening the noose. One director leaned forward, brows furrowed. "Are you saying your manager misrepresented your work?" His words echoed in the quiet room. I nodded, my voice steady but my stomach churning. Not just mine. Everyone's I have testimonies, patterns that go back years. I handed them a stack of corroborating statements, each page trembling slightly in my hand. Halfway through, the door swung open. My boss walked in, face tight with fury. "What is this circus?" he demanded, trying to flash the same confident smile that always won them over. But the air had shifted. This time, no one smiled back. I kept my voice level. "I'm showing the board the truth." His laugh was sharp, brittle. "He's lying. He's bitter. I've led this department with integrity." But then I projected the email, the one with his exact words, "Remove your name before submission." The silence that followed was louder than any shout. The directors turned to him, eyes cold. For the first time, I saw panic flicker across his face, and in that moment, I knew the tide had finally turned. The board didn't waste time. They called for an internal audit on the spot, their voices clipped and cold as they dismissed me from the room. I walked out on shaky legs, my binder clutched to my chest, unsure if I'd just saved myself or signed my own termination. Hours later, whispers rippled through the office like wildfire. Something big was happening. By the end of the week, the truth started leaking out. It wasn't just plagiarism. The auditors had dug deeper into expense reports, invoices, financial trails no one thought to question before. What they found made my stomach drop. My boss hadn't only stolen ideas, he'd been stealing money. Fake vendors, padded travel expenses, personal luxuries, hidden in department costs. Years of quiet theft buried under charm and manipulation. I remember the moment it all came crashing down. The entire office gathered in the open-plan space when two men in dark suits walked in alongside security. My boss, still putting on his usual smirk, tried to brush it off. "Gentlemen, I think you're mistaken." But then the badge flashed, and the smirk cracked. "Mr. Carter," one of them said firmly, "you're under arrest for corporate fraud and embezzlement." The words echoed in the stunned silence. Gasps spread through the room as handcuffs snapped around his wrists. For once, his voice failed him. He looked around, searching for someone to back him up, but no one moved. Not this time. I stood frozen at my desk, watching the man who had humiliated me, stolen from me, crushed me, finally lose everything in front of the very people who once worshipped him. He shouted weakly as they led him away. But all anyone heard was the clink of the cuffs and the finality in his footsteps. And in that moment, the humiliation I'd carried for months began to burn away, replaced with something I hadn't felt in a long time: vindication. The office felt different after that day. The whispers were gone, replaced with an uneasy quiet, the kind that follows an earthquake. People avoided my eyes at first, unsure if I'd been brave or reckless. But then the emails started rolling in, official memos from the board, statements about misconduct addressed, and finally, an announcement that made my hands shake as I read it. They promoted me. Not just a title bump, but recognition in writing that the presentation, my presentation, had been the reason. The board had faith in the company's future. Along with the new role came back pay, benefits, and an apology so carefully worded it almost felt sterile. Still, it was more acknowledgement than I ever thought I'd get. But the truth is, the victory wasn't in the paycheck or the office, with a view. It was in the quiet moments after everyone had gone home, when I'd stand by the window overlooking the city lights and let myself breathe. I'd almost let him convince me I was small, disposable, nothing without his shadow. And yet here I was, standing on my own, not because of him, but in spite of him. One coworker stopped me in the hallway a week later, their voice low. "Thank you," they said. "You did what none of us could." That simple sentence meant more than any corporate recognition ever could. Looking back, I realized the lesson wasn't just about ambition or betrayal. It was about worth, about refusing to let someone else steal your voice and call it their own. If there's one thing I carry with me now, it's this. People will try to take what you've built. They'll lie, manipulate, even smile while doing it. But the truth has a way of clawing its way to the surface, and when it does, no one can bury it again.